From a common pastime to the origins of a famous queen. Here are 10 ancient Egyptian facts you never knew. Today's video was requested by your boy King15. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Or head on over to our Instagram page and let us know there. Number 10. Board games. Ancient Egyptians played a number of board games, and archaeological evidence indicates this was a rather common activity. Senet, for example, is a game dating back to around 3100 BC. It consisted of a grid with 30 squares, arranged in rows of 10, and 2 sets of pawns. The rules aren't exactly clear, as they changed depending on the period and region where the game was played. Mehen is another popular game, and it's roughly as old as Senet. The circular game board depicted a coiled serpent in honor of the snake deity of the same name. The snake body was divided into rectangular spaces, and the playing pieces seem to have consisted of a few small spheres and several others shaped like lions or lionesses. Number 9. Treatment of women. Even though they were generally viewed as inferior to men, women in ancient Egypt enjoyed a great deal of financial and legal independence. They could make wills, serve on juries, enter into legal contracts, or buy and sell land. Most of the women didn't work outside, but those that did received equal pay to men doing the same job. Unlike in other cultures, where women were basically owned by their husbands, they could divorce and remarry. There was even a type of prenuptial contract which ensured that the woman would keep her wealth and property in case of a divorce. Before we move on, answer this question. Which organ did Anubis, the god of death, weigh on a scale to determine if someone would be allowed in the afterlife? Was it A. heart, B. brain, C. liver, D. lung? Let us know what you think in the comments section below, and stay tuned to find out the right answer. Number 8. Egyptian blue. The Egyptians had some of the finest artists in ancient times, as evident from works such as the Golden Throne and Burial Mask of King Tutankhamun, or the bust of Queen Nefertiti. One mysterious pigment used by these artists is known as Egyptian blue. The manner of how Egyptian blue was created has been lost, but it's widely believed to have been the first synthetic pigment. It was made from a combination of lime, alkali, quartz, and coloring agents, all of which were heated together until they became a crystalline mass of vibrant blue. It could be pressed into molds, worked by hand, or ground into a powder. Number 7. Egyptian animal-headed gods. The worship of Egyptian deities is among the longest-lasting religions in history, having existed for more than 3,000 years. In their earliest depictions, Egyptian gods were represented as various animals, but gradually became therianthropic. This means they were shown as part human and part animal, in a manner that was symbolic of their role in the pantheon. As such, the animal heads that the Egyptian gods are famous for were inspired by nature and reflected the gods' powers and attributes. Jackals were often seen in areas where Egyptians buried their dead. That's why Anubis, the god of death and funerals, was depicted with the head of a black jackal. The sun god, Ra, and Horus, the god of the sky, were both depicted with heads of falcons. The warrior goddess Sekhmet had the head of a lion, the fiercest hunter known to ancient Egyptians. SOBEK was associated with military prowess and pharaonic power, but was also a protective deity against the dangers of the Nile River. He was depicted with the head of a Nile crocodile, the river's most menacing creature. Number 6. Beer was very popular. Mesopotamians are usually credited with inventing beer, but the Egyptian brewed beverage was much closer to what we know today. Early Mesopotamian beer was thick and had a consistency similar to porridge, while the Egyptians created a smoother, lighter beverage that could be poured in a glass. Beer was extremely popular in ancient Egypt, and it was consumed by men, women, and children. It was regarded as a source of nutrition and was even used as compensation for work, referred to as hamu. There were also over 100 treatments in ancient Egyptian medicine, which included beer. Before we move on, official They Will Kill You merchandise is now available at theywillkillyou.com. It's out of this world. Number 5. They wore makeup and perfume. Both men and women in ancient Egypt wore copious amounts of makeup, as they believed the practice gave them a form of protection of the gods, Ra and Horus. Ores such as malachite or galena were ground into a substance called kohl. It was then applied around the eyes using utensils made out of bone, ivory, and wood. Women would also color their hands and fingernails with henna or stain their cheeks with red paint. Both men and women wore perfumes made from cinnamon, myrrh, and oil. Number 4. Depiction of pharaohs. In ancient Egyptian art, pharaohs are depicted as being physically fit, but the reality was usually far from it. Their diet of wine, beer, honey, and bread had a high sugar content, and moderation wasn't really a characteristic of the time. Based on the evidence gathered from mummies, most rulers in ancient Egypt were overweight and unhealthy, with some even suffering from diabetes. The sarcophagus of Queen Hatsheput, for example, depicts her as slim and athletic. Historians, however, believe she was balding as well as obese. Number 3. Time span. What we refer to as ancient Egypt is more of an umbrella term that describes a rather long historical period. In fact, Queen Cleopatra lived closer to present times than to the building of the first pyramids. There were still mammoths in certain parts of the world when the construction of the pyramids started. The first dynasty of Egypt was established after the unification of the Upper and Lower Territories, somewhere between the 34th and 30th centuries BC. The first king to rule over a unified Egypt, and consequently, the first pharaoh, was Nama. The last dynasty came from the descendants of Ptolemy, before Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. So, which organ did Anubis weigh to determine if a person could cross into the afterlife? The right answer was A, the heart. The organ was seen as part of the soul, and it was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, who was the goddess of truth. If it was found to be the same weight or lighter than the feather, then that person had led a life of virtue and was allowed to pass into the afterlife. Number 2. Building of the pyramids. There's a common misconception that the Egyptian pyramids were exclusively built under the crack of the whip and via the use of slave labor. The idea largely came from Greek historian Herodotus in the 5th century BC. The pyramids at Giza were actually built using a permanent workforce of roughly 10,000 paid laborers and thousands of temporary workers. They were skilled builders and artisans that took pride in their craft. Graffiti found close to the monuments indicates that they would often assign humorous names to their crews, such as Friends of Khufu or Drunkards of Makure. This doesn't mean that slavery didn't exist in ancient Egypt, but it mainly involved field hands and domestic servants. Number 1. Cleopatra wasn't Egyptian. Cleopatra VII, Philopator, was the last ruler of the Kingdom of Egypt before it became a Roman province in 30 BC. Cleopatra is remembered in history for her physical beauty, her love affair with Julius Caesar, and her marriage to Roman general Marcus Antonius, which ended with both of them committing suicide. Even though she's one of the best known political figures in the region, it's worth mentioning that Cleopatra wasn't actually Egyptian. She'd been born in Alexandria, but was part of the Ptolemaic dynasty. This meant that she was actually a descendant of Macedonian Greeks. Ptolemy I was a companion and historian of Alexander the Great, and he became the ruler of Egypt after Alexander's death. The Ptolemaic dynasty was the last dynasty of ancient Egypt, and they ruled for roughly 275 years prior to becoming part of the Roman Empire. Thanks for watching. If you could spend a day with a figure from ancient Egypt, who would you choose and why? Let us know in the comments section below.